I want to ask a simple question. Have you ever looked back at your former self, maybe from a year ago, or maybe from your childhood, and thought, why did I care so much about that? Or maybe, why did I care so little? Or why don't I care about this anymore? Some things change over time, and it may seem obvious that that's just how it is. But why do these things change and how they change is quite complex. And we're going to be diving into that today. So, we're going to be talking about the psychology, some of the research, the cultural aspect, and my own experiences on how our values shift over time. Welcome to today's episode of Happy Space, Healthy Place with Grace and Trivet. I'm your host. Before I begin the episode, I want to preface this by saying, before I began recording this, I had to do research, and the first question that I had was, what even are our values? And when I began my research, I encountered the article, What Are Your Values? From Psychology Today, written by Davis Cheeky. And in this article, they define our values as enduring beliefs upon which we act. And enduring is quite important in this because that means that they stick around. They're going to be with you for a long period of time. It's not moods or impulses that change in the moment, but are they permanent? Absolutely not. Once I found out that these were defined as enduring beliefs, or values, I'm saying, I had to continue my research as I was a little bit perplexed by what that meant. But as I continued my research, I ran into an article from the Annual Review of Psychology, in which they describe values as cognitive representations. And then I was even more confused than I was before after finding that article. But as I continued and thought about it more, it made me realize that our cognitive representation is basically our mental image, or our beliefs, in the way that they're shaped. It provides us a sense of structure with how we behave, how we interpret our feelings, and how we think logically. And with those pieces of the structure, we get our own mental image. But our mental image changes over time because slowly these will change over time. These shifts happen gradually, however. You're not going to notice them initially, and it takes quite a while. But you'll recognize it once it's happened. As I continued my research and continued moving on, some more things began to click for me, and something I hadn't considered before reading the article, Our Identity is More Powerful Than Our Core Values, was that our values aren't actually what we believe in, but they are, the things that we claim to believe in or claim to live by, but not actual reflections of our personality and our moral selves. They're reflections of our personal identity, which was a pretty interesting claim for the author to make, but it made sense, and as I continued, it made more sense because I thought if our identity changes in subtle ways, well, what else is going to shift, Our values almost have to shift because they have to stay aligned with the person that we think we are. We have this mental image that we have to continue to adapt to have a good understanding of ourselves. And this made so much sense to me. Coming to Clemson was a very big change for me. Obviously going from high school to college, that changes your routines, your surroundings, but slowly my identity has shifted in hindsight. I began here as someone who's simply trying to figure things out, but now I already have a much better understanding of myself, what I have to do for my own success, and how I can help others succeed around me. And I saw that as my identity changed, my values shifted as well with it. School became more of a priority for me. I've started developing new habits to help me with studying that in high school I didn't need because I was able to handle the course load and the material quite easily, in my opinion. But habits and hobbies that I might have previously developed in high school, I simply don't have time for or is not as important to me anymore. But just because they don't fit me anymore, that's not a bad thing. It's not random. It's not me losing who I used to be, but it's a new version of me. One thing I would like to say though, our identity isn't the entire story. Another major force behind what causes our values to shift over time is our environment. Everyone has a different culture, community, and social context that they live inside of and which they grew up upon or grew up in. And all of these are going to be different from person to person. In Personal Values Across Cultures, which was a scientific study by Sagiv and Schwartz, they explore the fact that values don't exist in isolation, but they're heavily linked to the environment that you grow up in and your social context. One thing that's very important in explaining this is an example. In some cultures, they value independence very highly, and they tend to foster that in raising of their children, with promoting values of self-direction and independence for these children, sending them off to school to walk by themselves, while other cultures might be focused on being very close together, emphasizing supporting each other. This may be seen as, in some cultures, the caring for the elderly or community responsibility for cleaning up the area and other ideas. But when you change your environment, whether or not you start a new job, go to college, get in a new relationship with a significant other, your value system your values are now being exposed to a new social context, a new cultural climate, if you will. And that's been something that's very interesting for me to consider because Clemson is very different from where I grew up on the east coast of North Carolina. And it very much so does foster ideas of independence. You have to be driven, independent, and understand your own goals and what you want, and you have to be very focused on those goals. And if you don't think about it actively, you're still going to absorb some of these cultural ideologies as you continue to mature as a person in this new environment. But that's going to be for everyone. I'm not here changing alone. All these people around me are also changing. These other freshmen, new friends, maybe new faculty, they're all adjusting. Everyone's doing the same thing, gaining a new understanding and trying to acclimate to your surroundings. After briefly delving into the article Personal Values Across Cultures and making the realization that these changes are not happening in just me, but rather to groups of people and all those around me, it led me to a study that was quite interesting and surprising. This is a study by Kendall and Raymond that was published in Sustainability Science, in which the other researchers look at how groups, not individuals, but groups, how their values shift over time. So they studied communities within different social ecological systems, which is different social structures, different environments, location-wise, and they expected to see rather large changes in the personal values as the environment changed, but they were rather surprised by what they found, as it was a much more subtle shift where there wasn't any dramatic shifts within the individuals, but these values shifted across the group in small ways, reflecting the pre-existing differences between them and in their communities. And from this, we were able to draw some conclusions. And you can say that people tend to shift their values together when they're in a group setting. And these changes happen hand in hand with relationship and the building of new relationships, and not isolation, as if you isolate yourself, you're going to change, yes, but not necessarily for the better, and you're just going to devolve from what you already are. And this study resonated with me, as people tend to shift their values together. For example, in freshman housing, everyone has to adjust, everyone has to get acquainted with their roommates, everyone is learning social norms, their independence. I mean, this is the first time you've not had mom and dad available to do laundry for you. Figuring out what matters to you personally and maybe what doesn't. Values shift collectively. They might not be the same from person to person, but nonetheless, they're shifting as a group. And that it's not that the environment changes one person at a time, but with this new group of people, the community has changed, and your community helps you build new relationships, causing you to grow. Once I explored how the community relates to changes in people, one question I kept returning to was, why are these values so changing? Are they so frequently changing, sorry. Are they fragile? Do they just vanish as time goes on? There was one study, a 12-year longitudinal study by Leijzen van Herk and Barty, that calls our values relatively stable. They don't change overnight. They're resistant to sudden changes, but obviously they're going to shift. So how will they shift? It's going to be a slow change. As you age, you're going to develop new ideologies. Your context of your environment's going to change. You know, you might be in a professional setting, you might be in one that's more social, depending on what type of career you have. And obviously your environment's going to change. And this is evolution, technically. Our values are evolving. They don't disappear. They don't get replaced instantaneously. They get reorganized to match what matters to you in the moment. When school started, what once became, or what was at one point a top priority, is no longer that. It's in the background, and school has become a priority, obviously. My priorities haven't been lost, but they've definitely changed. So once you look at all the research, the definitions, the explanations, the different influences, the group shifts, all of these different things, when you look at them individually, they might be self-explanatory, but when you pair them together, it helps to answer the question that I asked at the beginning: why do our values change over time? And with all of these different studies and articles, we're able to see that these changes are a result of our change. Our surroundings change, and we're required to adapt. Humans are designed to adapt biologically. Our values aren't shifting because we're confused or we're not who we used to be, but because we have to adapt to survive. Our values change so that we can keep going in a positive direction, so that we can keep moving forward. Our values change to keep us aligned with our own mental image, our personal identity, And they align with that so that we can continue to make sense of our environment around us. And these values shift to help us survive and feel a sense of belonging and to make meaning of our new environments, which is one of the most important things that you can do to feel to feel a sense of belonging or to make a meaningful connection. If there's one thing I want you to leave with after listening to this podcast today, it's that the shifting of our values doesn't mean anything bad. It's not weakness or inconsistency, but rather a sign of growth. So when you look back and realize that your values have changed, something doesn't matter to you anymore, or something's more important, pay attention to it. That's signs of you changing, how you're learning, adapting, becoming a new person. This is you changing in real time. These values aren't fixed, as I said. They're a part of us, and they're going to change. But thank you for listening. Until next time, and have a good one.